All right, we're group four. I'm Gabe Guo.
I'm Long Nguyen.
I'm Quan Vu. And
and we did the physical therapy project.
So, hi everyone. We are like physical therapy app group, and we are like Long, Gabe, and Quan. Um, so let's talk about like our like motivation for this app. Like usually when you have like minor injuries or like just kind of like little injury during exercise or like sport, like you usually like for like the legit way, like you're gonna make appointment to the therapist, and then it's way a while like to get into then having appointment, and it's also like expensive, costly. The other way around is that people can Google, go on the Google, and then it take a lot of time like to searching around, and then to find actually a good kind of like you have the symptom, but like you don't actually get a good kind of a diagnosis, and it might give you some like irrelevant like exercise which actually harm like or make the injury worse. And that's also happened with like the LLM one, which we're gonna also like sing about it later. Like it kind of like not user friendly, and then it's not really like accuracy on like how to do diagnosis, and that's the motivation of our app. So we're gonna make it like we have the pipeline from diagnosis to giving the high quality exercise that we're gonna scrape from like a high quality source of data. And here's like our current design of our system. So it's mainly based on like prompt engineering, and with like some manual like data collection from high source. So one of the source that we're using for diagnosis is like this book, like the IOC manual of sport injuries, which is reading from like the PhD doctor, a few PhD doctor from, I don't remember exactly the school, but like we found it PDF online, and then we read through it. And to narrow down our system, we focus on like shoulder injuries only. And when the user, we're using this book to parsing the data to extract the injuries data with the symptoms and all of like the factors causing it, and also like extracting the ROM test, which is like the range of motion test, which is usually happen when you go to the therapist. They're gonna do some range of motion test to better diagnose it. And the flow is gonna be like I'm gonna go from like user putting the input, like how they feel, and then the symptom is gonna be kind of like and analyze the entire like conversation so far to collect like the symptoms that the user has been input in, and then it's gonna go to diagnosis judging agent, which is like I think the diagnosis judging agent is gonna be we extract it. We have the injuries data, which is like I think I make a wrong errors here, but like the injuries data are going to be consumed by diagnosis judging agent with the symptoms that the user give in to giving the score of all of the injuries in our database. And then based on some threshold that we set up, we define currently we define it's point A something. And then if it's less than that, then it's going to be go to ROM test decider, which is basically like to see along the conversation so far, should we gather more like info or symptom info from the user, or like should we ask them to perform some ROM test? Basically, this is the branch, and then it's gonna go back to the user. And if the system confidently like above the threshold that we set, then we're gonna go to injury predictions, and then we're gonna go to retrieving the exercise retriever, giving them back the plan for practice the exercise, which is go to the next slide. To get a high quality exercise, we mainly scrape it from YouTube videos. And then for each of the injuries and symptoms, we basically like extracting the transcript, and then we getting that transcript to get summarization using DeepSeek to summarize it. And we actually manually verify it by reading through all of the exercise, verify it with WebMD and then Kaiser Permanente, to make sure that all of the information are correct, and then doesn't have any random information from GPT from the LLM, and then we store it into like the exercise data. And here Gabe is gonna walk us through some demo that we have been kind of preparing the script, because it's kind of like trying to simulate the real therapist section. So it's kind of have some unpredictable questions. So we kind of like having some kind of these few injuries with repair.
Okay, cool. And well, actually, it's not scripted at all. It's just like I'm imagining that I have like shoulder impingement, which I actually did have before. That was like kind of the inspiration. But I kind of just did some research on like a couple of different injuries and like really figured out like what do people normally feel? What are some like example scenarios? So I could best like accurately replicate like if I actually had the injury, because I currently don't right now. Could you hold this? I can type. Thanks. First, it just greets me. I can like enter in my profile to just like give some like supplementary information. Let's say I'm like 65. And so now like this will be like into its context, so you can have like you don't have to like repeat yourself during the chat history. So the scenario that I'm going to be giving is I have shoulder impingement. So an example that I researched was maybe I swim often, and I noticed a dull ache in my right shoulder after practice. So we'll send this to the system, and then it'll think about like what it can ask next to get more information. I guess like out of me. Okay, cool. So it's asking me how long I've been experiencing this ache. So I've been experiencing it for 1 month, and it has gotten worse over time, which is another like common symptom of like shoulder impingement. If it's not treated, it will usually get worse over time. So, see what it says next. Okay, so now it's asking for a little bit more details. Normally for like freestyle is a common one, and also like reaching above my head, above and behind my head. So again, we made the system a little bit more patient, trying to get more information out of the user rather than like jumping to conclusions right away, which I'll show in the baseline model after this. Okay, cool. So now it's asking me to do a range of motion test. So range of motion test is essentially the doctor will ask you to move your arm in some sort of position, and if you can like describe, or I guess the patient will describe where they feel pain, and that kind of gives clues on what the injury could be. So for this one, it's asking me to do a NIR test, and I researched this beforehand, but the NIR test is a way that you can see if someone has shoulder impingement. So if I had shoulder impingement, I would feel pain doing the NIR test. So it gives like a step-by-step instructions on like positioning, assistance, and the movement, and then tells me like what a positive test result would be. Another thing we added is we actually added diagrams. So we noticed that without diagrams, it's a little bit hard to know what to do when you're like doing the test. And so all we did was just create a database of a database of images that map to like the most, I guess, like frequent tests for shoulder injuries. So that's how we're able to retrieve that. So I feel significant pain while doing this test. And then we'll see what it says next. So if it's confident enough, it will give me like a diagnosis for whatever the injury it thinks it is. If not, it might ask for more tests or gather more information. Okay, seemed like that was like enough for it. So it thinks that I have shoulder impingement. I like that it gives like the reasoning. So like it's not just, it gives like the reasoning. So it's not just, I guess like, or it kind of tells me why it thinks that I have shoulder impingement. And then it gives the exercises to do. So these are exercises that we scraped online and like verified to ensure that it was like high quality. A mistake that we made early on is we tried to fine tune a model to give like better exercises, but we realized that we didn't have enough like high quality data to do this. And then also there's also like a finite number of exercises for something like shoulder impingement. So it was a little bit unnecessary to try to like fine tune on large amounts of shoulder impingement like injury exercises because that would result in like lower quality exercises, which is not something we don't want. But here it starts out with like easier exercises to like rehab it. So like the pendulum exercise is a really simple one, and it gives like detailed steps. Shoulder rolls is another like very like simple one. And then it progresses to harder exercises. And so I think, let's see, it doesn't actually list the steps out here, but these are some like more advanced exercises that you could do if I guess like you have the injury. So I wanted to show like what happens in the baseline. So I'm gonna like literally just copy like the exact same prompt right here. So I swim often. Actually, it's a little bit hard to copy this and see. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna go to ChatGPT. I'm just gonna paste this right here, and see. Let's see what it says. So it kind of just lists like a bunch of different things it could be, like swimmer shoulder, rotator cuff. It kind of just jumps the gun and just says these are some options it could be. But as like a patient, like I kind of want to know what I have, not just like because like what like it could be. And it just gives like kind of tips like manage the pain. Doesn't really give specific exercises. If I prompt it enough, it like might eventually get to like where it'll say, okay, it's most likely shoulder impingement. But what's nice for I guess like what we developed is that you don't really have to like think about that. You can just answer it, and it's almost like you're at like an appointment. So that's just like one of the exercises. If we have time, I could show another one.
Can you go to the app?
Yeah.
I'll just try out something.
Yeah, totally.
It's really good, by the way. It's like really thoughtful and everything. Let's say that like I was on a hike, I fell, and my leg is swollen. That's it.
Oh yeah. So right now it's only for shoulder
Or
injury.
it's only shoulder.
Yeah, it's only shoulder.
If you fall, would your shoulder be swollen? I don't know.
Yeah, we could do. That's actually I was like snowboarding the other day, and
Why don't you try
I went up.
something,
Yeah, something different. So, let's say like I was snowboarding off a jump, and I landed with my arm outstretched. And I feel pain in my right shoulder. Yeah, so we can see what it says. Yes, I feel swelling, or yes, I have swelling in my shoulder. One thing that's cool, which you can't really see right now, but if I plug into the laptop, you can see like the different confidence scores that it gives. So like based on your responses, it will adjust like what exercises it thinks. And we can actually like print that out and see like, oh, like it thinks it's like shoulder impingement, but then based on like a response I get, now it thinks that's actually a rotator cuff tear, which is like really cool to see like in real time. I can say like it was sharp initially, and now I feel a dull pain. Now I feel a dull aching pain. And then one other thing is, for some reason, it tends to ask, like, so we give it like some like ROM tests that it can try out, because if we don't, it doesn't really end up asking it. It for some reason likes to ask like Neer and Hawkins like first, almost always, and we were not really sure why, but it turns out that's actually like a pretty like common like one that like doctors will like start out with. But like, yeah, for some reason it will ask like, it usually asks like Neers and Hawkins first. Yeah, I have difficulty in moving my shoulder above, and also general weakness.
It's asking to do the same test.
No, it's asking for the apprehension test actually
Oh.
this time. So I guess maybe it's asking this because a lot of times when you fall and you have like sharp pain, it could be like a dislocation. So I think the apprehension test is like a common one for that. So I can say, yes, I feel significant pain and instability when doing this test. And again, it gives like the picture so that you know exactly like how to actually do the test.
Yeah, and one thing that like from the book we actually read, there is a part like it kind of.
No. Okay, so now it thinks I have shoulder dislocation.
Yeah, so actually like from the books there's a section like actually tell the therapist the diagnosis, thinking like how they should approaching a patient, like, and then like thinking about asking how to like perform the test to narrow down the diagnosis for the injury. So we also incorporate that into our prompt so that when the LLM consuming, it's kind of like pretend like actual therapist and then having that thinking also like to choose our most relevant ROM test for the symptom that they
The
give.
diagnosis process is actually pretty structured based on what we read in the textbook. It's not like the doctor's just going off vibes. Like it's actually like pretty direct. So yeah, so like fine tuning is something that that's what we.
That's really good, by the way.
In the initial demo, I remember like you had a templated like system form. Like,
Mhm.
how were you able to like improve it to like ask more questions?
Sure.
develop
Yeah, you want to, or
Oh.
guys,
Oh,
wait,
so
how were we? How did we switch from just like the script versus what we had?
oh yeah, so like kind of we breaking it down and then we just fit like like important information that's like we doing the multi-agent thing and then we letting it like to decide itself. For example, the diagnosis judging agent is just taking care of like, okay, here's the symptom, here's like the list of injuries in our database, giving us the score for like what do you think is the best the matching for that. And for example, like the ROM test agent decider, we also like fit the conversation, the symptoms, and then the set of ROM tests that we currently have, and then asking, should it collect more information or like should it like perform the test now?
something like like the same way we use like LLMs to judge,
Yeah.
evaluate like
Yeah.
peer review
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so on.
Yeah, we kind of we're using LLM to judge in the intermediate process to decide which is gonna be the next step to do it.
You have the slides, or?
Yeah, we have what?
Yeah, we have more
And
stuff.
then Quan will talk about the evaluation part, and then these are just videos, in case like.
We can skip them.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the evaluation plan for our exercise. So basically, we want to like compare how good the quality of our exercise is compared to the baseline model, which we decide to be the 4 mini, which is the model we decide to improve on for our app. And so we are evaluating based on 2 factors. So the first factor is like exercise versus exercise graded. So basically we compare like for the same exercise, what is the quality of the instruction between our app and then the baseline model. And then another factor so we want to compare is the plan versus plan, which is like for the plan that is laid out by the app to recover from injury, we want to compare like which one is better and which one is better worse. So basically we use a LM as a judge, and so this is like basically our prompt for the LM to grade the exercises. And so basically I just tell them that they are an assistant that could grade on them, and then decide on which one has the better grade based on the rubric, and tell me why that's the case. So for example, this is like how we for the rubric for how we do the exercise by exercise evaluation. So based on like how best they are, if the exercise has zero instruction or like it has like vague, then we will grade according to those. And so this is basically the summary of our evaluation for our exercise and evaluation score. So the way I do this was just when we prompt out the exercise that was given to us from the app, we tell the baseline model for mini to that. Can you give me instruction on how to do this exercise, and then compare the quality of the instruction by using other model as a judge. And basically this is a score. So these are like 3 common shoulder injuries, and for one like impeachment shoulder, we got like higher score than like our baseline model. And for the Rosetta cuts here, it seems like the baseline model has like a better score. And moving on, this is how we do the evaluation for the plan. So we break it out on like 3 criteria that we want to focus on for the plan. So the first criteria was the safety and proper technique. So like based on the instruction of the plane, like a little bit similar to the last one. Like we want to know that the plane as a whole, like will the quality of the exercise is like correct, and then the next is like progressive load and recovery. Basically, we want to measure like if the road path for the recovery like makes sense from how we like so we starting with like lower intensive injury and exercise and moving on to like high intensive one when we start recover, and then relevant was just basically like whether the exercise in the plane like makes sense to do for that injury, and then we sum up the all of the grade and then compare each other. So for this one, it seems like the baseline score was higher than our app. So the way I derive to the plan was just like for one diagnosis, for given a diagnosis, I would take the exercise plan from the app and then from the baseline model. Here is how I got this injury. Like, can you give me a plan to like recover from it? And so that's basically our evaluation.
I think what would be nice for Thursday is understanding why this discrepancy happens, because from the user experience, what you showed seems much better. So what metric will capture that experience from a user, which is not being captured here, because clearly something is off here.
Yeah, this is more like exercise versus exercise, like exercise versus exercise more than like user experience versus user experience.
I think like GPT-4 is like it is covering all its bases. So if you mention like accuracy on how well it's getting the specific condition, and in your rubric, if a model gets a disease wrong, if it gets 0, then that might be more representative of your performance, because you get your model gets the condition precisely, right, compared to
We do not have the chance to do the diagnosis evaluation.
I think you
so
could
this-
just change the rubric
Yeah.
to see if the condition is wrong, it should get like 0, basically no further. It doesn't matter how well the exercise is, the condition is wrong.
Yeah, so one of the thing I think is happening here is that like when you're approaching the baseline model, you not usually know what is your injury. And that's why it's when you say like you have a pain and shoulder when you fell up like the mountain or something, then it usually gives you the general like exercise. So that's why we base off like that is the baseline. But like for this one, when he did evaluation, I think like he know the injury itself. So like he prompting, oh, give me the exercise for this injuries. So I think that is
Which is not the
Yeah.
specific thing to
Yeah.
evaluate, because that is not, you should evaluate the whole chain.
yeah. I think that's where the this evaluation happening here.
But it was really good. The app itself, the interface is really good. But hopefully by next Thursday, the evaluation will
Yeah.
be on that part which was focused.
Yeah.
But really, really good job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.